Hey everybody, Mystified Monday, Metro Last Light. I was hoping I wasn't going to do another one of these so soon, but because of course I was playing Metro Last Light at this time, it had to be one of those games, didn't it? You see, when I reviewed 2033, the prequel to this, or I should say this is the sequel to that, whatever, I didn't like 2033. It was a complete mess of a game with extremely weak mechanics, where the stealth mechanics were just very rudimentary. Stay in the shadows, and you might not get spotted, except you can't see what you're doing in the shadows, unless you have night vision, in which case you can actually see what you're doing. Except that the game doesn't tell you you can get night vision goggles. At least not until fairly late, after the stealth segments are actually kind of important. And to actually get the night vision goggles, you have to know where they are in the first place. Well, if you don't know where they are, you can't get them now, can you? So that kind of renders the night vision goggles moot, because if you try to use your headlight, you get instantly spotted, basically. And so the stealth became an extremely boring chore. Extremely irritating chore, in fact. The shooting didn't fare much better. It was functional, but the gun mechanics were just extremely unsatisfying, and the damage modeling was incredibly inconsistent. Simple reason for that is, it turns out the game doesn't tell you that armor plating stops bullets. See, it doesn't have anything at all in the game to explain to you, hey, if you shoot these guys who have this heavy armor plating, it's not going to do any damage until you blast the plates off. Instead, it just assumes you know. Well, no, we don't know, because pretty much every other FPS on the market doesn't do that. Even the hardcore ones don't do that. So, once you learn all these things, it just becomes a pretty mediocre FPS. There was two things about 2033 that were actually really good. The first of them was the graphics. They were fantastic. It's still one of the best looking games we have. Second thing, the bit where you're going through the abandoned metro with all the shades of people in them. That bit was fantastic. It was incredibly atmospheric, downright creepy and unnerving. And I wanted so much more of that in the game, but they didn't do it. Instead, they thought that the stealth segments and the shooting parts were what people really wanted to see. No, not really. When you play through that bit with the incredible atmosphere, you want a hell of a lot more of that, not the subpar shooting, not the subpar stealth mechanics. So, when I see Metro Last Light, I'm like, okay, hopefully they'll have learned from their mistakes. There were other issues that 2033 had, mostly technical problems, and I am happy to report that I really haven't run into any technical problems in Last Light yet. So, they did learn from that at least. It's optimized better. It runs better. Graphics are better. So now this is one of the best looking games we have right now, and it looks pretty fantastic in terms of visual fidelity. As far as art style goes, it's still exactly the same as Metro 2033, so if that did nothing for you, like with me, then it's not going to do anything here either. Especially considering how dark the game is. I haven't edited the footage at all. You're seeing it exactly as I see it. I have the brightness maxed out. I can't see a damn thing half the time. Actually, that's being generous. It's more like 3/4 of the time. When you're trying to sneak around, it kind of helps to be able to actually see what you're doing. And since, as far as I can tell, there is no night vision, at least not early on in the game, not until later on. Or if there is, then the game neglects to tell you about it, like in the original game. Well, makes stealth a boring, tedious chore. They didn't learn from that, did they? You know what else they didn't learn from? Shooting mechanics. They're slightly better. The guns handle a little better. They actually are functional this time around, instead of just being irritating to use. Now they actually are not irritating to use. They're not fun to use either. but they're not irritating anymore, so there's that. Damage modeling is still pretty inconsistent, but such is life, apparently. So, they haven't really learned from 2 of the 3 biggest problems with the Metro series. That's problematic, isn't it? The 3rd biggest problem is what killed Metro 2033 for me, which is the plot. It's not an interesting plot in 2033, and it's not interesting here either. I have no reason to care about Artyom and what happens to him. He has no personality. All you get is the monologue that he has between levels, where he's basically just complaining and being miserable. Whoop-de-doodle-doo. You live in a post-apocalyptic setting. We get it. Life sucks. Also, yes, we get it. Nazis suck too. Yeah, they threw neo-Nazis in this thing because apparently that's a thing in Russia. But the way they're portrayed in this as the ultimate stereotypical Nazi, you don't care. You see, the world of the Metro is a bleak, depressing, grim place. There's nothing nice there at all. And so, when you go through the game, and everybody's all miserable, and all these Nazis are doing horrible things, it pretty much means there's no impact. You hear Nazis and instantly you know, oh yeah, they're bad guys, and they're gonna be horrible people. And they turn out to be horrible people. But it's not shocking, it's not depressing, it's just, we know. Nazis did horrible things. They continue to do horrible things. And sure, in a post-apocalyptic setting, they're gonna do horrible things too. I don't care. I don't care about anything that's going on in Metro Last Light. None of the characters are compelling. None of what's going on is compelling. Is it supposed to make me feel? Because it's not doing a good job of it. In fact, all it's doing is annoying me. It's constantly taking away control to make you go through these incredibly annoying scripted sequences. Like they learned nothing from how that was in Metro 2033, when that was irritating too. But this time around, there's more of that. You know, they could have done one thing that would have made this game so much better. One simple thing. Remember that bit about 2033 that I mentioned, where you're going through the abandoned metro and there's all these shades of people and it's creepy as hell, really atmospheric, really grim? Do more of that! Don't throw us in these stupid, ridiculous combat scenarios that make no sense whatsoever, that are just tedious to get through, because enemies really aren't that tough in this game. In case you haven't noticed from the footage, I've been slaughtering them left, right, and center. They're not difficult. Obviously this isn't on Ranger difficulty, but I don't care enough about the game to go on Ranger difficulty. Whoop-de-doo. It's hard. That's not what made Metro 2033 engaging when it was engaging. It was the atmosphere. And if they had capitalized on that, and made this more of a straight-up survival horror game, it would have been so much better. But instead, they learned basically nothing from Metro 2033. And instead just did what Metro 2033 did, with some very, very slight improvements in some ways, and a step back in some others. For example, when you get later on in the game, it goes into the whole blatant sexualization for the sake of having blatant sexualization in it. And while we're on the subject of that, let's take a mention of Anna, the love interest, who you know from the very beginning of the game is going to be Artyom's love interest. Even if you hadn't seen reviews before, even if you knew nothing about this game before, as soon as she walks onto the screen and starts insulting you, you know for a fact that she's going to end up sleeping with Artyom. It's so painfully obvious that it made me want to smash my head into my desk. I knew it was going to be like that, because I've seen stuff about this game before, but I didn't expect it to be that blunt about it. And I was just sitting there like, why is this here? Who thought this was a good idea? I just don't get it. I don't understand the thought process that goes into enjoying this game. I don't understand the thought process that went into developing it. It's just, if you take it as a game in and of itself, it is just extremely mediocre. There's nothing particularly great about it apart from its visuals. And it doesn't even rise to the atmosphere levels of the previous game. Instead, it focuses more on the mechanics, and it fails miserably at it. There are later parts of the game where it's sort of vaguely creepy, but not really. The only reason I say that is because, like so many other things, they seem to think that arachnids are creepy and scary, and if they throw those in there, then that means that their game is creepy and scary, right? Wrong. I don't understand. I just don't get it. How do you people enjoy this game? I can't enjoy this on any level. I can't enjoy its plot because it's just not engaging. I don't care about any of the characters. I don't care about any of the things going on in the setting. None of it makes any sense. And they just seem to throw as much cheap shot in there as they possibly can. I can't enjoy it as a first-person shooter. It's not strong enough in its FPS mechanics for that. Instead, it just ends up being pretty tedious. If I just judge it solely as a first-person shooter, it's just fairly mediocre. It's not terrible, it's just fairly mediocre. As a stealth game, it's a mess. There's just nothing really right about the stealth system because the AI is too stupid to really be able to get the most out of it. And the fact that everything is so dark you can't even see what you're doing, well, that doesn't make the stealth challenging, that just makes it annoying and tedious. I can't enjoy it as just an atmospheric experience either, because there's not really any atmosphere to speak of. The handful of moments that start to get vaguely atmospheric are all squandered because it's like, oh, well, we gotta throw in more shooting stuff, and we gotta throw in more bullshit with the story. I don't care about any of that. What I wanted was more moments like in Metro 2033, where you're going through this metro full of lost souls. That was interesting, that was engaging, it was atmospheric, it was creepy as hell, and it was unnerving. This just takes everything that Metro 2033 did that I didn't like, and does more of it, without any of the stuff that actually made 2033 vaguely interesting. See, at least there was that moment I could take away from 2033. That moment where it was like, I just see this thing, a glimmer of what could have been, and I could just roll with that and be like, okay, let's do more of this in the new Metro. And then they don't. It's just mind-bogglingly disappointing going into this thing. It's not the worst game I've ever played, don't get me wrong. They did make some improvements to 2033, don't get me wrong, but when you just take the whole thing into account, it's just incredibly disappointing. Instead of taking what 2033 did well, which wasn't much, but when it did do it well, it was fantastic. I'm of course speaking about that bit where you're going through the Lost Souls. That was so cool. I want to see more of that. But instead of doing that, they basically did the exact opposite. Instead of going for something that's subdued and more melancholic but atmospheric as all hell, and just kind of this moment to just kind of sit back and reflect on things and think about the horrors of this setting in a way that doesn't constantly shove monsters in your face. They seem to think that what really drives home this idea of a grim, depressing, ultimately hopeless world is turning you into effectively Rambo. No, that doesn't work. And there's no point in this game where you feel like you're completely helpless. It doesn't do enough to drive that home. Instead, you feel like an unstoppable badass that is constantly being held back by the game, rather than an actual weak human being that is vulnerable. And that's just such a missed opportunity. And that's really why I can't see why people enjoy this. It just seems to miss the point entirely. And I guarantee you, there are going to be several people in the comments right now that are going to be raging at me, acting like I'm the spawn of Satan, because how dare I criticize Metro Last Light for missing the point entirely. Because it's an amazing game, right? No, it isn't. It's a very visually impressive game. That's about its only good thing. Everything else misses the point entirely. It's just mediocre. I'm not going to review it. I'd played enough of it to know exactly how this is going to turn out. There's nothing that will salvage this thing. I've seen enough of the future parts of this game that I know nothing is going to salvage it. And when people inevitably act like I hate everything because how dare I criticize Metro Last Light, know this. I take no joy in not liking this. If anything, I would love to like it, but I can't. There's too much wrong with it. There's just far too much missed opportunity. I didn't want another Metro 2033. I wanted something that took the one bit of Metro 2033 that was actually good and expanded upon it and capitalized on it. Instead, it took everything else and capitalized on that, which misses the point entirely. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, but know this. I'm not going to review this, and I'm never going back to it. I quite literally cannot bring myself to play this thing anymore. I wish I could. I wish I could find a shred of enjoyment in this, but I can't. And if they do decide to make another Metro game down the line, I'm not going to bother with it. Don't ask, because I won't. I see what this series is doing. I see no reason to continue bothering with it. Thanks for watching, folks. Catch you guys in later videos.